Welcome to Series 3 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew, author of 3 novels, and someone who's interested in how other writers write, why they do it, and the fun or joy they get from their writing. I'm joined again by Lizzie Enf, and in this episode we discuss the marketing of books, a process that every writer needs to be part of, and also hear how Lizzie is getting on with writing book number 7. Finish Your Book was published at the end of July, and congratulations on getting that project completed and out there. What was your reaction to it?
Well, it was a strange experience because I don't know when lockdown, I know when it started, I'm not quite sure when it finished or if it's finished or if we're still in it. So it's a very different process to all of my other books which came out, you know, with a bit more of a bang. I had a launch for every other book that I've had out in it, and it felt like something was happening. And I think one of my previous books, I had the launch not for the hardback, but for when the paperback came out. So then there's quite often quite a big, or the other way around. But I used to liken the hardbacks to having a baby but leaving it in intensive care, because it was sort of out but not really out. And so I suppose this time you know, it was out, but there was no real manifestation of that. There was no sort of launch, no coming into bookshop, but the sales you know, were there. So that was quite gratifying. And also, as I said to you last week, you know, this was my lockdown project. I was finding it quite hard to write my novel during lockdown because of all the just anxiety and stress and children being home and people needing to be phoned several times a day. But I did want to produce something. So I was very, you know, I had that sense of satisfaction that comes, which I think is, you know, part of the joy of writing, is that feeling that you have created a final product. And so thinking, okay, I've done that, all that sort of sitting and scribbling away. And as we've said, I work as a journalist, and there was a kind of switch when things became digital. I actually started off at the BBC, but even in the broadcasting context, there was a sort of loss of that sense of physically producing something. And when I first worked in radio, we worked on, this dates me, my children can't believe this, but, you know, on 1/4-inch tape that ran from one spool to another spool, and you would edit a report by cutting it up with a razor blade and sticking it together again, and then you would pick up that spool. So you'd gone out and done all your interviews, stuck them all together, you'd pick up the spool and you'd carry it down to the studio and give it to the studio manager, and you had that real sense of, at the end of the day, just having a physical thing in your hands. When it went digital, you just sort of did it all on the screen, hit send, and that would send it to the studio manager, and you lost some of that. And that was sort of the same with journalism when things started becoming online. So I think that was the really nice thing about, you know, having the book, receiving the paperback copy, and thinking, yes, this is, you know, I haven't just sent an article off that's gone on the BBC website, that somehow you lose some of that sense of having physically made something. So I did feel like I haven't just been churning out words during lockdown. I have a product, and that was, you know, a good sense of achievement. And I am quite sort of driven to achieve something. And I think that is the thing that I'm, you know, I've also been encouraging people to do in the book, is that sort of sense of just getting a first draft done, and then another draft, and then another draft. But, you know, I often say to people who work almost entirely online, even though, you know, you are discouraged from using too many trees, but I think that sense of physically printing something out and going, look, this is it. You know, I wasn't just sitting tapping away. It's not just 80,000 words that the word count is telling me. It is this. I've done it. So
it's a different thing in physical paper as compared to
feels more real, and you have that sense of, I've made something.
Great. And also, as well as writing it, you need to, for example, get the cover designed. How did you go about that?
I found a brilliant cover designer through Reedsy,
Yes.
which website for writers, publishers,
Yeah.
called Nikki Ellis, and she's done a lot of books for various publishing houses, and she was absolutely brilliant. Actually, I'm really pleased with the cover. I thought I'd given her some ideas about the colour. I wanted it to sort of look quite similar to my previous book, which I'd sort of branded my website to look like. And she came up with a great design, I think, of the sort of falling pages falling down into the book, almost like leaves falling off a tree, but those leaves of paper falling into the book. And I thought, that is a great image for a sort of unfinished book falling into place. So I'm really pleased with that. And she did the internal layout as well.
Yeah, very good. I mean, the cover is very, very important indeed. And as I learn going along, you have to have a strong cover.
You do have to have a strong cover, and it's a very strange process. I remember when my first novel came out, I don't know if she'll thank me for saying this, but I sort of said to my editor, I knew nothing about the process, and I said, how much input do I have into the cover design, because I think paper cuts would work really well. And she said, no, you have influence. We're either going to go with an illustration or a photograph. And I thought, but then she did actually look at some paper cuts and decided that that was a good idea. And actually listeners can't see, but I can show you because we're recording this on Skype.
Yeah.
But they came up with that, and I've got the original, which is all sort of cut out of paper. And at the time, it's often capturing sort of what looks good at the time, and these days as well, what stands out on Amazon, as a Kindle cover. So I am pleased with it. It's a very hard thing, I think. I think designers are the sort of unsung heroes almost, because it's quite hard to.
That's a good point, especially in such a crowded market where you do have to be able to stand out as distinctive. Now, you've appointed yourself as head of marketing for this project. How do you enjoy that sort of role? I mean, all authors have to help market their work.
Do I enjoy it? I enjoy the element of being in sort of feeling that you can actually do something to help it out into the world. As you said, all authors do. There's a lot of onus on you to do the marketing for your own book. You have a very short stab with a major publishing house. Quite a short time frame in which the attention is on your book, and then it's on the next author and the next author. So to keep that going is down to you. And I think that's something that a lot of authors don't realise at the start of the process, really. And it's something that you learn several books in, that you've got to be quite proactive yourself. So it's, obviously I've worked as a journalist, so I can help myself slightly, whether I like it or not. It's a hard process, as you know yourself. And that, there comes a point when you sort of think, right, everyone's going to be sick of me now saying I've done this thing. Do you want to hear about it?
That's a really good point. I always think, you have to moderate how much you're out there. I mean, people really should be just wanting to read your book, not sort of respond to ads and all the rest of it. But
and I think the thing with all marketing really is, you can't sort of help but say, but what's been, what I've been able to do with this book on social media and things is sort of put out, a daily tweet with a nugget of advice from the book. And then sort of, I hope I'm saying quietly, and, that's sort of in the book. I've just put a link to the book at the end. So you're hoping that you're saying kind of a little bit more quietly, I've got a book out. You're sort of saying, here's some helpful advice, and if you're interested, I'll go into that. That's obviously harder to do with a novel when you are, but again, I think what you almost need to, people get tired of the authors going, hello, I've written a book, it's the bestseller list. But they don't get tired if people go, I've written a novel and it examines domestic abuse or, the isolation or something that we're going through at the moment. So I always think it's trying to elicit interest in a non-commercial way with obviously you've got a slightly commercial aim, which is, you're always the subtext is always, please buy my book. Yeah. But you're trying to say it quietly, please buy my book, rather than shouting, please buy my book. But it's all saying, please buy my book, really.
Yes, it is really. I do remember a chat show where Dawn French had a book out and she came on with 2 copies of the book stuck either side of her head. And I thought, that's pretty much it. It was sort of half, I've got a book to sell.
Yeah.
Half, I apologise for that type of thing. So now, of course, it's time for the next project, and I know you're writing another book, which is actually the 6th book, which is a great place to be for any writer.
Actually, if you count this book...
I suppose 7, is it?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
And how is that going along? I mean, what is it about? If you want to say anything about it, I know lots of people don't like to jinx the process.
I call it, my pitch is it's a contemporary Jane Eyre. And it sort of goes a little bit beyond the point at which, the Mrs. Rochester character dies. So it's a thriller, which elements of Jane Eyre are to me. It is a sort of thriller. And I've finished a draft and I'm now redrafting it. And actually that was what I found hard to, I don't know why, but this sort of block that I had during lockdown, I got this finish your book done and then obviously thought, right, now I have to finish my book. A lot of my redrafting is rewriting. So when when you talk about redrafting, I'm doing a lot of rewriting. There's a lot of extra stuff that needs to go in. The whole of the middle section, I need to switch the point of view. So there's quite a lot of work to be done, but I have started again doing the everyday, get down to it and get going with it, and have got my goals and my targets of when I want to finish it by. But, we were talking just before we came on air, and that writing process is organic, and even though I pretty much got everything in place, as you're rewriting and redrafting, more things come into it and more storylines occur to you. So it's, it is still growing, and I will have to take quite a lot out of it in order to grow it. So it's, it's a bit like the eat out to help out. It's sort of, grow it to shrink it, or shrink it to grow it. And I'm a bit of both of those. I'm sort of shrinking it and growing it at the same time.
Yes, I've just thought of a new analogy, because it's my favourite thing to think of analogies. And I'm thinking it's like you bought an old house which needs renovation, and really every room needs work. So it doesn't matter which room you start on.
I live in that old house.
Oh, there you are. Right.
But hopefully, unlike an old house, at some point it will be finished and the damp won't always start to reappear when you've just finished replastering. But yes, it is. I am starting at the beginning. For me, it does. I do need to sort of start at the beginning and, work through to the end, but it's growing at the same time. And it's quite nice. I think that is actually my favourite stage of writing. I find the first draft quite hard. And there is that sense of I don't know quite where I'm going or how this is going to end, even if I, have that in my head. But once you've got everything down, I think it's much easier to add and subtract than to start completely afresh. And the characters, everything, as you've got a sense of it, so it feels more solid. It's not that unknown. My analogy is going back to the sort of baby analogy, I suppose, but it's like sort of you give birth and you don't really know what your child is going to be like, but now you've got it on its sort of first birthday, and it's it's already grown a bit, and the colour of its hair and its eyes, and to a certain extent its personality, unlike a child. Then you are then trying to sort of shape it, which, unlike children who have minds of their own about how they're going to develop.
Well, that's a good analogy, because you do need to let the child grow in how they're going to grow. I like that analogy. Again, it's the more organic approach. You might have had a very definite idea to start with, but you do have to listen and look at what you've written and really see where it's going. From your book, what do you think is some of your favourite own advice that's really ringing true for you now?
Now, that's a good question. And I think it's, in part, it's the simplest advice of just getting on with it. But it's also the not being afraid to make changes, really, and not being afraid to cut stuff out or be precious about your work or hold on to it. And I think that is probably the most important thing in making something any good. But also one of the early reviews from this of this book said something like, and I thought, this is it. She said she sort of, knows instinctively what to do, but tells you not to be afraid to play with it. And I don't know if I just said that myself. You know what it's like when someone parrots your own advice back to you, but they phrase it so you sort of think, oh yes, that is good advice, but I wasn't even really aware that I was giving it. But I think that is it is, as I've just said, the enjoyment of it comes at this stage, and it's thinking, okay, I've got it now, and now is the time to play with it and to recognize that stuff doesn't work, but that's not wasted, and to make some quite big changes, and it's also the time when the themes and really come into it, and you start writing more into what the book's about than simply what happens. So I don't think I answered that question very well. It's always hard to know what your own advice, which bits of your own advice you would take. But I think it is just really that, it's more the keep working with it and keep playing with it. And,
right.
Keep committing to the process, and maintain that confidence, really. And I think that's probably the most important piece of advice is, just because things are bad doesn't mean you should lose confidence in what you're doing. And I think that's where a lot of people come unstuck, because they think really this is bad, and they lose confidence in the overall project. And there your house analogy is good, because you kind of think, just because this wall is crumbling doesn't mean that the overall house project, is a dud house project. So I think that is probably my main piece of advice, is that just keep confidence and learn to recognize the bad, but not be discouraged by it, and work on it and to turn it into something better. And it is, a colleague of mine likened the sort of redrafting to the to being a sculptor. Instead, you've got the kind of you've got the lump of rock and you've dragged it from the quarry or whatever it is, but that is your first draft. You've dragged it from the quarry, you've got it here. That's really hard work, but it's a lump of rock. And it's kind of that knowing it's a lump of rock, but you're starting to chisel and polish it and turn it into something beautiful. And there will be times when you still think, there's a lump of rock in the living room. What am I doing with that? But it's that sort of having the confidence to see forward and see the little bits that you've done and think, yeah, it's starting to take shape, and it will take shape.
Exactly. Have confidence and trust the process, and remember that you're in charge. I mean, you made that rock out of mental stuff.
Yes.
If it is a house with a crumbling wall, well, just replace the wall.
Exactly.
Kitchen. Okay, right. Put a new kitchen in. It's just you are in charge of the whole process, and of course there'll be setbacks, but you'll get over those. So just be confident, and bring this project to a close. Yeah, that sounds very simple. I think everybody should do that.
Yeah, I think everyone should do that too. Just finish it.
Just finish it, yeah. I mean, for me, getting the first draft done is the bit where you grit your teeth and get that block of rock made. And then, as you're saying, playing with the first draft is the fun part.
Yeah, and I think also, actually, the other bit of advice that I would take myself is don't lose sight of the whole, but don't always think about the whole, because that's an overwhelming task.
Right.
So it is breaking it down and think, right, I'm going to now, you're working on a chapter at a time, or you're working on a section at a time. But if you a bit like when you start out writing, if you think, oh, I'm never going to get this finished, it's recognise what you are getting finished. You have written 10,000 words. That's the point when people tend to think, I'll never get to 100,000 words. But you think, no, you've written 10,000 words that you didn't have before. So that in itself is an achievement. And it's really very much the same with the redrafting, that you can go on through to the end and sort of think this is still a big sprawly mess. But you think, but the beginning is now coming together. So it is that breaking it down. I think the psychology just of breaking it down and, working in small chunks and thinking, okay, in September, this is what I'm going to achieve, and not setting unrealistic goals. And because I think that a lot of that is what panics people. They just think, I've been working on this all this time and I'm not getting anywhere. And you have to recognise that you are getting somewhere. It might not be as far as you hoped, but you are always getting somewhere. If you're working on something, you are always taking small steps forward.
Very good advice. That's it. I mean, you do have to show a bit of perseverance, or 99% perseverance.
Yeah.
and you will be there. Very, very interesting, and that's really good advice to follow. I look forward to talking next time about a subject we haven't really covered before on the podcast, and that is the conception of success. I mean, there is the joy of writing, and that's lovely, but then people would like to be successful with their books, so I look forward next time to exploring that with you.
That's an interesting topic to explore, and I shall keep my fingers crossed for success in the meantime.
I'm sure it's there already, and there's more of it coming along. Thank you, Lizzie. In the next episode, Lizzie and I discuss what counts as success for a writer and author, and we also hear about a book that inspired her. You can leave feedback on any of the episodes at podchaser.com/The Joy of Writing, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.